August 1814. Washington, D.C. is in flames. The White House, Capitol, Treasury, and other public buildings have been burned by over 4,000 British Redcoat troops, storming up the Chesapeake Bay with naval support, raiding, looting, burning, and cutting through American militias along the way. The War of 1812 had started well for the Americans, with several early naval victories in the Great Lakes. But once the British had finished with Napoleon and exiled him to Elba, they could turn their full attention to their rebellious former subjects, and America was once again called upon to assert her independence. Washington, D.C. had indeed been a major prize, but those British eyes then turned to their next significant target, America's third largest port, the heavily defended Baltimore Harbor. And only one obstacle stood in their way: Rising Star Major George Armistead, his 1,000 troops, and Fort McHenry. Armistead had been awarded command of the fort a year prior in 1813, and upon assuming the role, he made two simple orders that changed our country's history. One, aware of Baltimore's high value as a British target, he immediately began to improve the defenses. And two, he wrote a letter to Major General Samuel Smith, commander of the American forces at Baltimore, stating, "We, sir, are ready at Fort McHenry to defend Baltimore against invading by the enemy. That is to say, we are ready, except we have no suitable ensign to display over the fort, and it is my desire to have a flag so large that the British will have no difficulty in seeing it from a distance." Soon thereafter, under government contract, Armistead ordered 2 flags for Fort McHenry to be made by local seamstress and professional flag maker Mary Pickersgill and her family. One was a smaller storm flag, and the other an absolutely giant garrison flag. It measured 20 by 42 feet with 15 stripes and 15 stars, each stripe 23 inches wide, each star approximately 2 feet in diameter. In true early American fashion, it was assembled on the floor of a brewery as the only interior space large enough to accommodate the project. It was these 2 flags that Armistead flew from Fort McHenry and were in active use when the British, who had just finished destroying our nation's capital, had burned their way up the Chesapeake Bay coast in September 1814, set on taking Baltimore. The following Battle of Baltimore was a combined land and sea attack, but the British land troops couldn't proceed without naval support, and the British Navy couldn't progress until they had subdued Armistead and silenced the guns of Fort McHenry. The city, the harbor, perhaps even the war itself, hung in the balance. With stalled advances on land, British ships withdrew beyond the range of Fort McHenry's guns, and for the next 25 hours rained their full might on the Americans. It's estimated that 1,500 to 1,800 cannonballs were launched at the fort, some 133 tons, not including the bombs bursting or the red glare of the British Congreve rockets. The bombardment lasted through the night and could be heard as far away as Philadelphia. But when dawn finally rose on the morning of September 14th, 1814, after the British had broken off their attack, Armistead ordered the smaller storm flag lowered and his massive garrison flag raised at reveille as if it were any other morning. An everyday activity turned into an act of international defiance, unmistakably declaring that was nothing, and we're still here. Armistead's gallant defense and his stalwart fort had saved the city. Across the water, on a mercy mission to release a friend-turned-British prisoner, American lawyer Francis Scott Key was inspired to write of the battle he had just witnessed and titled it Defense of Fort McHenry. Eventually, the famous poem was set to music and retitled for Armistead's defiantly waving flag, the Star-Spangled Banner. Today, that flag, Armistead's flag, is housed in the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. It is a true national treasure as presented to it by the Armistead family. Not only had Armistead's defense changed the tone of the war, it changed our nation forever. It gave America military momentum at a critical turning point. It produced a powerful national icon, our eventual national anthem, and, after the eventual American victory in the War of 1812, led to the subsequent era of good feelings, where there was an overwhelming sense of unity and national purpose, this newfound sense of patriotism, and a great relief that the freedom that the nation had won for itself not 4 decades earlier would be preserved. To this day, at Fort McHenry, a bronze statue of Armistead stands watch, and on most days, he is joined by a foot-for-foot recreation of his 15-star, 15-stripe Star-Spangled Banner. In the following years, the battle's stress took its toll on Armistead's heart, and he would pass just 3 years later at the age of 38, still commanding his fort. His funeral procession was cited as immense, and posthumously, on George Washington's birthday, his son, Christopher Hughes Armistead, was presented what can only be described as one of the most historic and significant American swords in private hands. This lavish blade, scabbard, and custom-fitted case were presented by the Commonwealth of Virginia in honor of Brevet General Colonel George Armistead, the hero of Fort McHenry, who both commissioned and raised that Star-Spangled Banner which inspired our nation's anthem. The sword is an embodiment of classic 19th century American art. However, because of the formality of its presentation, we don't have some of the artistic themes of the time. Instead, the sword is clad in the neoclassical style of the early Federal period, as well as its patriotic motifs, appropriate for a nation that had once again asserted its independence from foreign rule. The sword was made by the famed cutlers and artisans at N.P. Ames in a pattern very similar to their model 1840 medical staff or paymaster swords, but raised to an absolutely breathtaking level. One could write a small book speaking of all the artistry and embellishments, but most notable are the following. And the first is that this hilt is solid gold. Not gilt brass, not gilt silver, but solid gold. One book on the topic notes that, quote, in all places where the gold showed, except the scabbard, Ames had used solid gold amounting to $300 worth of gold. Today, that's over $67,000, and that's just in the hilt, in the center of which is a shield, and it's bearing a scene from the Seal of Virginia, no doubt familiar to the Virginians who presented it. A depiction of virtue, victorious over tyranny, his crown strewn upon the ground under a banner of Sic Semper Tyrannis. And on the opposite side, his elaborate inscribed presentation. The gilt silver scabbard in the central mount bears a solid gold plaque depicting the naval battle of Fort McHenry, the Battle of Baltimore, which granted Armistead his fame, but at the cost several years later of his life. The state of Virginia ordered only 9 of these lavish $600 swords, several of which are currently housed in respected museums. It's no overstatement to say that this sword is also worthy of the nation's most prestigious museums. In a just world, perhaps there within the walls of the Smithsonian, the Armistead sword, gilded and given in gratitude, on permanent exhibit, next to the Star-Spangled Banner he raised. 2 icons of the land of the free and the home of the brave. but only one is in the June 27th American sale, held only at Rock Island Auction Company.